imagining the sanctuary full because I know that you're all out there watching, and we're so grateful that you're with us today. So thank you. This week I got to go running and for three times and did the distance. Yay! The first time I started running, and part of my run is on a gravel, like a little trail, and the other part's on pavement, but I got a little pebble in my shoe. And you know how that is when you got a pebble in your shoe. You feel it, you constantly feel it, and it's uncomfortable, but not enough to have to stop and take it out. So I went with it and just kept running and tried to forget about it, although hard to forget about. The next time I ran, a couple days later, wouldn't you know it, as soon as I started, I realized that I didn't take that pebble out of my shoe. It was a little more uncomfortable this time. I still didn't stop. I didn't stop to take it out. I just let it go. And I started thinking about how we do this in life. We may be uncomfortable with something. We may not feel quite right, but the pain isn't great enough to make a change or to do something about it. This pandemic is changing that. Things are a lot more painful for a lot of us. There's a lot more suffering. There's a lot more heartache in the world. And we're invited to do something about our own feelings around it, our own reactivity around it. And so this month, or these 7 weeks, we are working with this book by Tara Brach called Radical Compassion. We're doing our small group program. So many of you about 150 of you are working together in a small group. We're grateful for that. And if you're not in a group, we send out discussion questions on our e-bulletin every Sunday so you can follow along. But I encourage you to work with this book. It can help you deal with or release or work with those feelings that we don't generally like hanging around. Those feelings of confusion and lack of control and anxiety and fear. Those feelings that don't feel so good, like that small pebble in your shoe. It can actually feel like a large boulder in your shoe if we let it go too long. And so we have the ability to take care of ourselves, to have compassion for ourselves, to heal ourselves and nurture ourselves. And that's what this book is all about. It's finding that self-compassion. I love that it really aligns with our theme this year of seeing through a spiritual lens, because as we see through a spiritual lens, we see that this divine essence within us is able to nurture, is able to heal, is able to have compassion. It also aligns with our mission, which is we inspire personal transformation. Personal transformation meaning that we don't act from our reactivity, our old patterns, but instead respond with love. Tara Brach says this on page 17 about transformation. The deepest transformations in our lives come down to something very simple. We learn to respond, not react to what is going on inside of us. You know, and that's so true. And that's right at the beginning of chapter 2 for this week's reading, chapter 2 and 3. She talks about this transformation. No matter where we are on a spiritual path, this pandemic is bringing up things for us to look at, to heal. None of us are immune to the virus, and none of us are immune to reactivity from this changing time, from this chaotic time. We all have different levels of how we're reacting to it. We all have different ways that we're responding and different emotions that we're feeling as a result. But we all can heal from that. This pandemic and these changes can trigger in us those unconscious patterns that have been laying dormant. Or maybe they've been active in you, but they can trigger us. So it's important to have a spiritual practice, to respond with love rather than from fear, because we can't control what's going on outside of us. We can only control what's going on within us. We can feel separate, like we're cut off from our own source, but the truth is the source is within us. That divine presence is within us. I want you to get a sense of Tara Brach, and she's got lots of videos on YouTube that you can watch. She does a lot of online classes that are available for you to see. I want you to get a sense of her. I'm just going to show a very short video of her speaking. So let's start that up, Bonnie.
I think John O'Donohue, who I love, poet and teacher who I really loved, said it beautifully. He said, what happened to our wildness? You know, to really just trusting our aliveness. And it's because we go into trance, we leave home. So then the question is, how does that happen? And there, on an existential level, you could say that anything that comes into creation, all that incarnates, has a perception of separation. There's a sense of a membrane, and in here is me, and out there is the world, and we have to self-organize to protect and to get, and so on. And that the primal mood of the separate self is fear. Now, it doesn't mean we're always in the grip of a very intense terror or something, but as long as we're navigating and there's a sense of me or self, there's some tension about, will I get what I need, and is something threatening? That gets exacerbated, and this is something so many of the presenters and teachers have explored in our families, in our culture. Our culture in particular is one that is really competitive. We have all sorts of standards that are set on how to be, and there's very quickly a sense of falling short, that we have to really prove ourselves. Read you one of my favorite little essays. It says, if you can start the day without caffeine or pep pills, if you can be cheerful ignoring aches and pains, if you can resist complaining and boring people with your troubles, if you can understand when loved ones are too busy to give you time, if you can overlook when people take things out on you, when through no fault of yours something goes wrong, if you can take criticism and blame without resentment, if you can face the world without lies and deceit, if you can conquer tension without medical help, if you can relax without liquor, if you can sleep without the aid of drugs, then you are probably a dog.
I love that little clip. Obviously, we're not dogs, but this shows us that this whole range of emotions that we feel, to be gentle with ourselves, that our wholeness is experiencing all of the human feelings, all the negative one that we perceive as negative and those that we perceive as positive. That whole bunch, for lack of a better word, bunch of emotions is what we experience here as human beings. But we have this part of us, this spiritual part of us, this divine essence of us that can rise above these feelings, that can find a way to heal, that can go beyond the confusion and the fear and the pain, beyond the normal human reactions that we sense. Not to judge ourselves, but to lift ourselves up. to see the potential, to say yes to all our humanness, and invite Mara to tea, as Tara talks about in this second chapter about the Buddha and Mara being the shadow self that brings the anger and the fear and the anxiety and tempts us to be drawn in that direction. And the Buddha said, just invite him to tea. Now, we wouldn't want to invite him for a big mug of tea or a pot of tea, but a small cup of tea. Say yes to those emotions, those feelings that are part of our humanness, and let them be okay. No judgment, no blame, no shame. Just let them be okay. Can we do that? Can we invite Mara to tea and say yes without judging those emotions and just acknowledge them? This is part of the technique that we're using in this book called RAIN, where we recognize what we're feeling, whatever it is, and then we allow it. That's the saying yes part. That's the Mara to tea part. We just allow it. We allow those feelings, because beyond that allowing, beyond that yes, instead of a big no, is where we can tap into our higher self, our divine self. That essence is longing to come forth. And as we practice this, effort matters. It doesn't matter how well you do it or what kind of results you get, or if you feel like it's just not working, or if you're still seeing yourself reactive. Because the more we do this, the more we practice this, the more positive we are, the more potential we see, the more possibilities are available to us and we see laid out before us. We need to wake up and choose differently. And this is a wonderful technique to help us do that. How do you want to be in this crisis? How do you want to respond to what's going on in the world? This is our choice. It's a great time to work on our spiritual practices. On Thursday started Ramadan, which is Islam's sacred practice of fasting for a month. It's the month where the Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. And it's a month where they fast to put away worldly desires and focus on a spiritual life, focus on their faith, focus on God. It's a great time for us, too, during this pandemic to focus on our spiritual life, focus on our faith, focus on our own guidance, focus on what is Spirit trying to reveal to us through this time. What is Spirit revealing to us? Every emotion that comes to us is got a lesson or something to teach us. Are we open to that? Or are we resisting? Are we pushing aside those emotions and getting angry about them or judging ourselves about them? This is a practice where we recognize them and then allow them. It can change our lives if we let it. It allows you to say yes to your wholeness, to the wholeness of being human. Tara says this about saying yes to this experience. The more you say yes to experience, the more the openness and presence of that yes will be embodied in living cells and shape your life and shape your entire life experience. This is really Unity's third principle that says our thoughts change our experience of life. Would you like a better experience? We change our thoughts. It doesn't mean we change, our conditions are changed, but our thoughts change our experience of life, especially now. Those emotions can be really challenging. Neuroscientist Jill Bolte-Taylor says in My Stroke of Insight, she had a stroke, and she talks about how emotions in the body and brain last only really 90 seconds. That's the full lifespan of an emotion. The sensations of the emotion, the redness of the face, the rapid beating heart, or whatever sensations you get from the emotion last only 90 seconds. And if it goes on longer than that, it's because of the story we're telling ourselves about it, the thoughts we're holding on to about those emotions. Can you see the truth in that? I remember I was at a regional convention a few years ago, and Reverend David Alt was there. He's a CSL minister, and he was saying, why do you think it is that happiness seems so fleeting? It doesn't seem to last. Those happy moments seem to just come and go. But those moments of pain, those moments of fear and anxiety and confusion seem to last forever. And he said, it's because the happiness moments we don't resist. We don't resist things that feel good. We just experience them. Whereas those other thoughts, those other feelings, we hang on to. We build a story around them. We want to get support for them. We want to share them with everybody, how much of a victim we are. It doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve us. We have so much potential in us that we can rise above these feelings, that we can practice this technique to help us heal. Tara talks about the story of a big, huge statue of Buddha that was needing to be moved, and it was it was a big clay Buddha in the 1950s. And the monks were trying to prepare it to move, and they noticed some cracks in it, and so it was starting to rain, so they covered it with a tarp so it wouldn't get wet. But one of the monks went back and started looking at that crack. He was concerned about that crack, and he shined a flashlight at night under the tarp and saw that this bright golden light, that this Buddha was really covered in clay, that it was a solid gold Buddha that hundreds of years ago the monks at that time had covered up to protect it as they were about to be invaded. That's so true of us. We have all these clay coverings that we let cover us up instead of letting that brilliant light shine through. What is that clay covering for you? What is that thing that we identify with and we hang on to, and it's like a core issue of ours? Instead of healing it, instead of looking at it, instead of saying yes to it, investigating it and nurturing that so that it can move on its way. Clay coverings tend to keep us safe, and they reveal those core issues. For me, this pandemic has triggered feelings of an overwhelming sense of responsibility. And with that comes this need that I have to take care of everyone, that I have to make sure everyone's all right. And as a result of that, I often feel like I don't get the approval that I want, or just the recognition from a human point, the recognition that I want. And so this triggers in me. And I was noticing it this week, that it triggered some really deep anger in me. Thank goodness I have this rain to work on this. And I started working on it, and I recognized the anger. And I recognized this need to feel recognized and feel appreciated. And the anger was not feeling like I was getting enough of it. And we never, from our humanness, feel like we get enough of what we think we need. I had a session with my spiritual director on Friday, and I only got so far in this process. I only got to the recognize and allow. Okay, I was allowing this anger, but it was just sitting there because I wasn't moving on from it. Allowing this anger, saying yes to this anger. So my spiritual director helped me with the next steps of that. in investigating, which is the next step after allowing, what is really going on? What is really going on inside me? And where is that in my body? And for me, it was my heart. My heart was just aching and breaking for all the pain that I see in the world. Kevin and I watch the PBS NewsHour every night, and there's stories of people who are so much worse off than we are. We are really, truly blessed here. Many of us, most of us in this community. So my heart was breaking. And I came to realize as we talked that this was a very young part of myself that felt like I needed to get approval. I can feel it right now, recognition. And as we move on from that, when we really investigate it and know that it's a young self, we can really see what that young self needs. What do we need? We needed the love. That young self needed a hug. That young self needed to hear the words, I love you, I appreciate you. I see what you're doing. I feel you. And she helped me see that I don't need outside approval. None of us need outside approval because we will never get all the approval that we need from a human standpoint, ever. We just won't. Because when we need approval and recognition from outside of us and we can't give that to ourselves, we are letting ourselves be at the whims of other people's consciousness, which waxes and wanes based on what they're going through. We will never feel fulfilled when we look outside to get the nurturing that we need inside of us. We can always give it to ourselves. We can always love ourselves, have compassion for ourselves. And when we come from that place then, when that is what is longing to express, not the anger, we can be so much better for everyone whose lives we touch. We can extend that love. So after she worked with me on this and I was able to nurture myself, I was able to see this, and then we have to sit with this. You know how good it smells after it rains outside? That smell of rain, that it's fresh and clean, and we need to sit with this too after we've had a realization, after we've had some kind of sense of healing. And that's what this process does for us. And the more we do it, the more we're building neural pathways in our brain so that it becomes easier and easier. It's so important for us to wake up, for us to be that Christ self. The more we do that, then we come from that place, and then that's what we're sharing with others. We're sharing our positivity, we're sharing our love, we're sharing our compassion, we're sharing our peace, instead of sharing the victim, sharing the negativity, because that will just breed and spread. We want to breed and spread the joy, the peacefulness. And when we nurture ourselves, we can do that. Life is calling us to this higher, deeper place, to interrupt our ego habits, to look at that clay covering and take it off and let the light shine bright, where there's more peace, there's more joy, there's more freedom. Tara says this on page 28. Our deeply grooved habits of no, our angry reactivity, anxious worry, defensiveness, addictive behavior, and self-blame keep us from living true to ourselves. When we interrupt these habits with a mindful, allowing presence, we begin to access our full human potential. And I would say not only our full human potential, but our full divine potential. There's so much more to us than our humanity. I just love the story of Jesus in the boat with the disciples as he's fallen asleep and it's storming out and the disciples are scared and they are waking him up and Master, Master, wake up. The waves are coming over the boat and we're scared and we're going to drown. And he just looks up and says, he wakes up, where's your faith? Peace, be still. And the waters are calmed. This metaphysically is us. Wake up that divine essence. Yes, there's a storm all around us. Yes, there's chaos all around us. Yes, there's confusion and changing times and despair. But we can wake up that inner Christ. Wake it up and say to those thoughts in our head, in our consciousness, peace, be still. Be still. Are you willing to wake up that future self, as Tara calls it, future self, that higher self, that Christ consciousness? Are you willing to wake it up? Are you willing to calm the storm? Are you willing to be the peace that you want to see and you want to experience? Are you willing to keep those appointments you made with yourself, to practice? Because it's a practice. We have to keep coming back to it over and over and over, just like a gratitude practice or a forgiveness practice or meditation practice. We don't always get it right. Don't let there be any judgment about that. Just keep coming back to it. Just keep practicing it. Make an appointment with yourself to practice this technique. Is your aliveness worth it? Mine is. Yours is. Even though I don't see your faces, I imagine your faces and I see it in you. You are worth it. You deserve this aliveness. You deserve this joy, this sense of peace. Wake it up. Practice. Say yes to whatever you're experiencing. Don't resist it. If you're in a small group, we're asking each of the groups to practice this each week. Practice one of the meditations in the book. The book is filled with meditations, different guided meditations that you can use. So practice. Tara says this on page 49. Far from deluding yourself, you are actually calling forth your own potential when you reflect on your wise or future self. And the more you conjure up the qualities you most value, the more they become an ongoing, accessible part of your being. Conjure up those values, those qualities. They're there. They're in you. And let this be a time where you allow Spirit to reveal to you what needs to be revealed and heal what needs to be healed. I'm going to move us into a time of meditation. And you might be tempted to turn off right now. I invite you to just stick with it. This is a time where we align ourselves with our higher self, align ourselves with that Christ essence, that Christ consciousness that is in each of us. Allow yourself to see the potential in you. Allow yourself to nurture yourself. To give yourself the love that you so long to have, long to feel, knowing that you are that love itself. Practice recognizing. Practice allowing. Practice investigating. And practice nurturing. See yourself giving yourself a great big hug. And we'll take all that love and all that hug and the goodness and how it feels to feel loved into the silence for just a few moments.